Today is May 9th, 2018. My name is Jenny Matz, and it is my great honor and pleasure to be interviewing Lauren Zalaznick here in New York City for the Interviews and Oral History of Television. So we're going to take a few minutes to just talk about your early life.
Sure.
Can you tell us when and where you were born and your name at birth?
My name at birth is the name I have today, Lauren Jane Zalaznick. I was born at Mount Sinai Hospital in Upper Manhattan, but I was born and raised as a kid all the way through my parents who moved to the city in the year 2000 from Great Neck, Long Island.
Mm. And did you have any siblings?
Yep, still do. Have an older sister and an older brother.
And what were your parents' names and what did they do?
My parents' names were Abner Zalaznick and Gloria Zalaznick. My dad, for most of my early life, through around 1980, was in the garment industry here in New York City, and then he transitioned to real estate and investing, also in the city. And my mom was a teacher. She had a master's teaching degree. She raised the three of us, and when she went back to work, when I was in probably junior high, middle school, as an interior designer and decorator.
Wow.
Gloria Zalaznick.
Wow,
Yep.
So fashion and interior design.
Yeah, no, teaching and interior design.
Teaching and interior design.
Yep.
Do you think you inherited any traits from your parents?
I must have, by virtue of DNA. I would say the predominant strain that occurs to me for this, which is an interview about my life's work, is my love of actually working, no matter what I'm working at, which I absolutely inherited from my dad, who loved to work and I wouldn't say lived to work, but loved every second of the feeling you get when you accomplish something at work. He was also the owner of, sequentially, his own businesses, and I understood exactly what it meant to build and own and run your own business. And from my mom, I would say I really began to understand how you could teach yourself later in her life something that she wanted to do, which was interior design, and that anything was possible at the time you decided to do it, from both my parents, who changed careers midlife.
Did either of them ever encourage you to follow their footsteps, or?
I worked directly for my dad for a long time. I graduated early from high school, a semester early, which was unusual at that time. It was before the gap year came into being. And I worked for him for 2 summers in high school, and then for the 6 months of my second semester, senior year in high school. But I would say by the time I graduated from college, he was already transitioning to real estate and investing. And there was not any pressure, and there was not pressure. We were leading each of the 3 kids, leading our own lives.
What were some of your interests growing up?
Oh, I was a big nerd. I was a big reader. I was a classical musician. The 3 kids, we were not a participating in sports family. I was and am a big cook, baker. I was and could be, if I focused and had the time. I'm crafting is the term for it now. I was a big knitter, all kinds of needlework. I was a big nerd. That's what I was.
Do you remember any television you watched growing up?
I remember all of the television I watched growing up. I would say this would come as a big surprise to my 3 kids, who ironically view me as never watching television, which is interesting. I was a classic TV after school in the late 70s kids. So it was a weird time. It bridged, the thing that doesn't really exist today, the thing called reruns, bridged everything from I'm trying to think what was actually in reruns and what I was really watching. But, the early Hogan's Heroes, Gilligan's Island, like that set of sitcom reruns, to the end of Dark Shadows. I still recall vividly Barnabas Collins. I was a huge game show person. And in late high school, like many people at that time, General Hospital was my gateway into soap operas. And it was exclusively General Hospital and the entire lineup that really, the peak for me was All My Children.
I read you actually watched the Watergate hearings as they were happening. Do you recall
Oh,
that?
yeah. Well, primetime was a different thing. Primetime, I would say my earliest recollections of TV in primetime was, it must have been a weekend night, because I distinctly remember, I hope I don't get this wrong, Green Acres into Petticoat Junction. And I distinctly remember my bedtime being after Green Acres and begging to stay up just to hear the theme song of Petticoat Junction. So that was probably the 60s, and I was in the little single digits. And that was a very clear memory. By the time of the Watergate hearings, you know, I was 9, 10 years old. It was a, you know, dinner table topic of conversation. It was a New York Times front page, you know, day by day, long, years long, you know, mystery that was unraveling. And I guess somehow they were televised all day long. And so that kind of combined the after school, that's what was on. People were fascinated. My mom, who was home, was fascinated, all the way into primetime viewing and primetime coverage. And it was really remarkable. And it was, I wouldn't say it was a revelation about television, but it was certainly a revelation about the power of watching people under pressure, you know, through a lens.
Interesting foreshadowing for you, I guess, a little bit.
In terms of
reality television.
Oh, no. I thought you meant today's political situation.
Oh, well, that too, but for you personally.
No, for me that was a news event. It was politics. I understood the importance of the, somehow, at
9 or 10, wow, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it was the President of the United States. It was, you know, in my view at the time, not that distinct from the resignation under threat of impeachment. So that's how it related for me.
But entertainment field was not something that was on your radar at the time when you went to college and were deciding on a major? No. You know, it was not in my world. We didn't know anyone in today we would say media, but then in television or film or entertainment in that way. And it wasn't television that I originally thought I was going into. It was film. And what happened was at school, I went to Brown University, and at Brown, I elected to double major in English while also fulfilling my pre-med requirements. So what happened was my English thesis was a little bit innovative in the sense that it was a very traditional book with a very modern, at that time, read on it, a semiotic read on a very traditional book, Tristram Shandy. And the medical school track was a separate track. And I really was getting to the end of senior year. I had fulfilled the requirements for both my majors. I knew I was going to hand in my thesis. It was really exciting. I told you I was a big nerd. And it occurred to me after having done the pre-med track, taken my MCATs, and applied to medical school that it was this enormous decade-long commitment to be accepted to medical school, to go to the 4-year medical program,
do an internship, do a residency, specialize in something, which at that time I thought for sure would be psychiatry. It was really the only area of medicine I was interested in. And in a very not so sophisticated calculus, I decided that it would be much easier to just give, as I thought of it then, entertainment in the form of filmmaking a try. And then if it didn't work out, I could reapply to medical school rather than the 8, 10, 12-year journey and then give entertainment a try. So that's what I did. I pulled my applications and, you know, in retrospect, it was kind of unusual. I don't recall any pushback from my parents at all. Their daughter, the Jewish doctoress, abandoning it for this uncertain life of entertainment. They were very encouraging. And I graduated and knew I had to get a job, and I did.
Now, why film, and how did you get that first break?
Why film is because the flip side of my English major was a very deep dive into film studies, cinema studies, and media studies, which at the time was called semiotics, which today at the same school it's called modern culture and media. And so the film studies led to an incredibly deep appreciation of the art of filmmaking and the meaning in the culture of these landmark films that weren't necessarily art films, but even the biggest films in the world, whether it was movie musicals or noir or road films, whatever the genre, the impact that this particular visual art could have. And that's what I wanted to do. I graduated young. I was just 21 years old when I graduated. And that's how I got to want to work in film.
All right, so now talk about, and your first break was in compromising positions, and how did that, you said you knew no one in that field.
Absolutely no one in the field. In Great Neck, Long Island, this, you know, suburban, very well-to-do, affluent, concentration on education community, it still is today. I had a next-door neighbor who was in between, not closer to my generation than to my parents, but was in between, significantly younger than my parents and older than me, meaning like her kids were 15 years younger than me and she was 15 or more years younger than my parents. And this next door neighbor had a best friend, and this best friend happened to be a world famous author named Susan Isaacs. And Susan, my next door neighbor, was really best friends, and still is today, with Susan Isaacs. And it occurred to me in the spring of senior year at college, reading the New York Times, reading a review of Susan's miniseries on ABC television, Almost Paradise, I believe was the name of the book, made into a mini. And I thought, wow, you know, there's my friend, my next door neighbor's best friend. I see them all the time. I'm going to ask Susan Isaacs if I can, and then not realizing that if I was reading a review of it in the paper, I couldn't work on that production. It was probably a little too late. But I said, gee, how could I get to work on something like that? And, you know, when I think of it, it was really generous of my next door neighbor to say, yes, I know you know Susan, but yes, you can, you know, interface with her in this sort of professional manner. Like, we never talked about the fact that she was a famous author or anything like that. And then it was incredibly nice of Susan Isaacs to, you know, sit down with me and say, well, I'm new to this too. Here's what I think. I have this book. It's out. It's called Compromising Positions. And it is being optioned right now. And she may not have even used the word option, but, you know, it might become a film, not a TV series. And she said, you know, I'm sitting down with all these directors and all these producers, and I'll let you know what happens. And so just a couple weeks later, she got on the phone with me and said, well, here's the thing. I've met a producer director who gives me the creeps the least of any director or producer that I've met. And I'll give you his name, and you can write to him. 100 years ago, write to him, not email him, not even call, no, nothing.
Stamp everything.
Right. Yeah. And so she gave me his name and address, like not even a phone number. And I wrote one letter on my Olivetti, really cool, Italian, beautiful, self-correcting, amazingly advanced typewriter, wrote my letter, typed my resume, put it in an envelope, licked a stamp, licked the envelope, and put one letter in the mail to this guy. Graduated from school, took a little road trip, came home in June, and literally my mother answered the phone and said, you know, honey, there's a call for you. And I got on the phone, and it was Frank Perry, and he said, I understand you're interested in, you know, I don't even know what I said I was interested in. I understand you want a job. Can you come meet me tomorrow? So I went into Manhattan. I saw him in this incredible townhouse in the East 60s. His office was on the garden floor, the ground floor. I mean, I remember it distinctly. I remember being shown into the parlor floor, and then at the back of the house was his office, and this big, beautiful, felt, you know, antique, everything felt meaningful and big and huge and grand. And his office or study was filled with books, filled with scripts. His desk was, you know, filled with papers. And he was hunched over what turned out to be a stack of scripts and ledger paper filled with numbers. It was a budget. And he said, you know, welcome, nice to meet you. And then he self-deprecatingly said to the numbers on the spreadsheets, this is art. Welcome to it. And one letter, one guy, one chance, got the job.
What was the job?
Assistant to the director.
And what did that entail?
It entailed having the greatest, you know, horizontal landscape view. The film was not green lighted, let alone not a finished script, not cast. So from that minute in June till almost a year later, we developed and got the film green lighted. You know, when I think of it, it was you know, the mid 80s, but it was really the end of the New York studio film era. This was a Paramount film, and every studio had a major presence in New York, which it really was the end by the end of the 80s. But it was a form of filmmaking that yielded, you know, all these iconic films, you know, French Connection, you know, all, the whole of 70s and early 80s New York film. And what really happened was that I was in script revision meetings, I was in casting meetings, and I was also from Long Island, where Compromising Positions takes place in the book. And so all of a sudden I was dispatched to be in the locations department to help think of all the different kinds of places, like where would this kind of shopping center be? Where would this development be? And I got very involved in location management and production management, in addition to being Frank's assistant.
And it was an amazing cast. And
it was an amazing cast. It was actually unbelievable because Susan Sarandon and Raul Julia were the leads. But the supporting cast were really the incredible icons of Broadway at that time. We had to work around their nighttime Broadway schedule, their matinee schedule, and take into account the traffic to get them in for their curtain, 6 nights a week. So it was quite incredible. It was also my introduction to reshoots, where after we wrapped the film was in editing, we had to reshoot Susan Sarandon in kind of important scene. But by that time, she was pregnant with her first child. And I remember all of the set stuff that, of course, hair, makeup, and wardrobe knew before anyone else and kept that a secret. And that sort of being revealed to production and having to restage the entire scene with her sitting at this dining room table rather than the original round and round the table walk that she did.
So what appealed to you about this world? This is a far cry from psychiatry.
Not really. not really. What appealed to me is that it was immediately apparent that this was a craft, that from the creative development of the story that someone wanted to write to the intersection of finding a person who wanted to tell that story visually, to even the craft of the technicians, where you can be an electrician or an accountant or a truck driver, any of the technical unions. But for some reason, these people chose to do those technical or craft-oriented life's works on a film. So if you want to be an accountant, go be an accountant and get in at 9 and leave at around 6. You're good. You want to be a film accountant, you're in a production office, you're on the move. It really just was incredible to me that a certain strand of creative was attracted to this kind of storytelling, no matter what their life's work, from the purely creative, actor, director, writer, to the technical, electrician, truck driver, grip, etc. It fit with me. I'm a stamina person, and films in particular, probably even more than TV due to location shooting, it's about stamina. Like, how good you are is a direct intersection with how much sleep you need to get by on, whether or not you're comfortable outside, freezing cold, burning hot. It's a very physical world. I like the fact that there's a lot of serendipity to the thing called a great script, to the thing called on-screen chemistry, back to the location idea. Like, it matters how the sun is in the sky and how that affects the scene that you're shooting, and hearing a director of photography or director kind of talk about that and then see how it lays down on film, was apparent to me right from the get-go.
Now, we won't get too deep into your film career. Obviously, this is mostly about television, but you worked in film for many years as locations.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How did you decide that producing is what you wanted to do, and what was your first opportunity to do that?
Right. So after college, I worked on pretty big films. These were studio productions. You got in with a group of people who hired you as a freelancer. So from that perch, as you know, location management, production management, and I saw the track. You're a track to get into a guild, the Producers Guild or the Directors Guild, PGA, DGA, and it kind of, occurred to me that I just didn't know if I was cut out to spend what I knew it would take, 6, 8, 10 years to climb the ladder, let's say, of location manager to get into the guild, to
like AD to first AD.
second to first AD, which, by the way, does not lead to being a director. And so when I think about it, what really happened was, for being 21, 22, 23 years old, I was away on location. I worked all the time. I had a great weekly rate. I was in the location department. I had a per diem for my car. I had a per diem for being on location, but everything was paid for. And I got back from, I have the rare honor of having worked on an Alan Smithy film, a film that was so disastrous that no one would put their name on it. And by the way, I think we had like 8 directors who could have, and none of them chose to. And I got back from that movie. I was really tired. It was a long and phenomenal shoot, because some of my closest friends are still from that shoot, but really depressing that this really was the other side of filmmaking. You're going to make a lot of bad films. At that level, you're not in control of what you make. And I got back to New York, and I had enough money to do nothing. And what I did was live across the street from one of the iconic video stores of the time, New Video. And I basically watched literally 2 or 3 or 4 movies a day for weeks, months. And in the middle of all that, a mutual friend from Brown, who I now happen to have been married to for 32 years, but at that time he was a friend from Brown, and he said, hey, our friend Christine Vachon, hey, is making Todd's first film, Todd Haynes. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, no, really, they need some help. They're trying to get this thing together. And I said to myself, oh, Christine will never want to talk to me, because she'll look at me as like this big, slick Hollywood, person. And Phelan, my husband, was saying to Christine, like, hey, you should talk to Lauren. Like, she worked on these films. She knows how to do it. And Christine was saying, oh, she'll never want to talk to us. She's real big and slick. She won't want to do this. We don't know, low budget, whatever. And so that lunch got brokered. And at that lunch, Christine said to me, hey, we're doing Todd's film. It's called Poison. I can give you the script, but here's the deal. Right now, I'm the unit production manager and the first AD. It's too much for me. We should split up those jobs. I'll split my salary with you. You pick which one you want to do, and I'll do the other one. And we somehow came up together with the idea that she should be the first AD, since her relationship with Todd, and that's, best for the AD. And I kind of knew what a UPM could do. And she very kindly agreed to split her $200 a week salary with me. And that's how I got my first producer credit on a feature-length film.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you think film was something you would stay in as a
career?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that lasted for years and years more. It was a total of, 10 or 12 years between when I graduated from college and when I took my first job in TV. But the other thing that happened during those independent film years was that I needed to make some more money than what the art films would allow. So also by happenstance, by agreeing to produce someone's totally freebie, everyone did freebies at that time, and you worked on whatever you worked on during the week, and a friend or a person said, hey, we need help on this thing, it's a really cool project, on the weekends. And usually it was in exchange for an upgrade in your credit. So a gaffer could be the DP, a dolly grip could be the key grip. Like really from the ground up, you could level up on a freebie. So someone I produced a short film for was actually a commercial producer and director. So his leveling up was that he was directing a short dramatic film. And from doing that favor as a free producer, and I was a really good producer on the short film. He gave me commercial work as a commercial producer. So all of a sudden I was a commercial producer. And that led to this decade of producing in New York commercials, music videos, and the thing that really ran New York television was this golden age of on-air promotion at the MTV networks, where on-air promo had this vaunted position outside of the marketing department. It operated totally separately. It reported straight to the presidents of the networks. And that's really how I bridged filmmaking to TV, was through this commercial and promo world.
Do you remember any of the promos you made for MTV in that
Yes,
time?
I absolutely do. For the MTV networks, we did what we thought was a huge campaign at the time, and it was an acronym that spelled out the word awful, AWFULL, and it was for Nickelodeon, and it was really this long series of promos about this entire world. I wish I could remember what the acronym was for. It was like adults who did something like clever but nefarious, and the kids came and saved the day, which was really the Nick mission, that adults know nothing and kids know it all. So we did this big Nickelodeon set of promos. We did all of the advertising for Swatch Watch at the time. We did a series of promos for NBC Sports, which for some reason we shot on location in Central Park. And then the big commercial advertising was every kind of big client there was in the heavy hitter New York advertising world.
So you were known to the higher ups at MTV because you're working directly with them.
Yep.
So now it makes a little bit more sense. Doesn't seem like such a jump, but who tapped you?
Yeah.
In '94 to be vice president of on-air promotion.
Vice president, my first job, vice president. What happened was a guy called John Sykes was the newly installed president of Video Hits 1. It was not yet VH1. And John asked John asked a couple of the really, really, really cool producers who had left the MTV network's on-air promotion department to become directors to come in and interview for the on-air promos job. Because I'm telling you, on-air promos was like a big deal. It was a great job. However, they had already done that gig at MTV, and they had left to be freelancers, big directors, big commercial and music video directors. So a bunch said, like, well, we'd love to help you out, but like, we're directors now. We're not going to come back and take this exec role. And several of those people, including Steve Stein's partner at the time, John Kane, and my husband, who was also an on-air promos producer at MTV Networks for Judy McGrath at that time, a bunch of people gave John my name. So John, the reason I'm laughing is that really the bridge to television from film is nowhere more crystal clear than how John got in touch with me. In the spring of '94, Christine and I were shooting the Larry Clark Harmony Korine film, Kids. And at that time, right, years later, from a full 10 years later from when I graduated, there was still no internet. And on a low budget film like Kids, I don't know if there were cell phones, but we were not carrying around, the suitcase size cell phone yet anyway. And we had set mail. And so mail, messages, call sheets, new crew lists, pink pages for the script would come from the production office in a manila envelope for each person on the crew. And so my set mail came in my manila envelope, LZ, producer, and I'm sorting through it, and literally, you know, there was a stack this big of pink while you were out phone message slips. And then you go through like this agent, this person calling to yell at you, this person, something, something, disaster, can't find the kids, like whatever, all about kids. And one message was John Sykes, VH1, you know, 258, you know, call the number, please call, important. And I'm like, you know, got to deal with all these other things, and literally like crumpled up the pink paper. We were shooting in a tenement in Hell's Kitchen. It was a brutal day. Threw it on the floor. Guy, persistent, another day, another piece of set mail. John Sykes, important, please call. I go home, I say to Phil, I'm like, John Sykes is calling, what's that about? And he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, I mentioned that he should call you for this opportunity. So that was April or so. Months and months and months later, John and I finally get it together. He makes the offer. I say yes. I start in September, but right before I accept the job, I go into John, and he actually called me at home and offered me the job over the phone. And it was a Thursday night. I mean, I remember it like exactly. And he said, I'm really pleased, you know, we have this offer for you. We'd like to have you take this. And I said, I'd really, really, really like to. I need to see you tomorrow morning before I accept the job. And he's like, I don't really need to see you. We've seen each other enough. I need to hear that you want to do this job. I'm like, I need to see you in person. And crazily, when I think back on it, the reason I needed to see him was because from the time in April that I first got the first message to that Thursday in September when he offered me the job, I was now 5 months pregnant. And this was a really big job. It was a full redesign of VH1. It was transforming it from this sleepy, weird, you know, stepsister of cool MTV. It wasn't even really, it definitely wasn't a TV network yet. It wasn't even really a fully formed music network yet. It had Gallagher smashing watermelons. I mean, it was really nuts. And so I guess I had it in my head that I needed to go in and say, hey, look, I'm 5 months pregnant and your redesign is supposed to be on the air in January, and I'm going to be here for 3 months, and then I'm going to be gone for a couple months, and then I'll be back, but I just want you to know. And to his credit, I don't know if he would recall this at all, and I see and speak to him all the time, we could ask. I go in, I have my big, you know, confession. I'm like, hey, buddy, you know, look, like this is the way it's got to go. I can't be here all the way through. And to his credit, he said, I understand. I feel like human resources like has a policy and you should go find out what that is. You need to start Monday. Like, seriously, he was so focused. This was Thursday night offer, Friday, go see him. He's like, I need you to start. Like, that's the point.
What was his confidence that you could pull it off, this total redesign?
Oh, well, I don't know. Apparently very, very strong. And it was absolutely not something I had ever done. Like, I could produce promos, but this was a marketing, creative branding job before we even invented and then, you know, kind of ruined the word branding. And that's what we did. And you know, to this day, the DNA that kind of we wove into the old Video Hits 1 shut that down forever and invoked VH1, or tagline VH1 Music First, was the beginning of, you know, kind of the modern VH1 era.
Yeah. Were there many other female executives at VH1 at the time?
Yeah. When I came in, Linda Corradina had just, was this transformer of the MTV News department, this award-winning, incredible department. And she was brought in to be the head of programming. Judy McGrath was the president of MTV. in my shop, I'm trying to think. The head of music and talent was a guy. The head of sales was a guy. It felt, you know, it probably wasn't, but it felt rock and roll. I didn't know enough to think otherwise or really assess it, which, you know, is a through line. I just, you know, probably didn't open my blinders enough for a long time and just went in and did the job and was rewarded for it.
Mm-hmm. So how much did you have a role in Music First and that rebrand?
Oh, it was my redesign. I think we pitched it out to a few different houses. I'm not sure. I brought in a person who, as my art director, Dan Appel, who had been in the art department of some of the independent films that we had done. I think, when I think back on it, I think John showed my pitch, my team's pitch, to a bunch of people. And I think it's the, again, vaunted genius Fred Seibert who said to John, you should consider, like, here's all their taglines. You should consider this rotating tagline system, which was a great idea, but a nightmare to implement. And somewhere in all my boxes, which I should have sorted through before this interview, I feel like I have all the alternatives to Music First. And each one had like a music-specific little tagline. But Music First was the one that we determined for the logo lock, and we got rid of our big branding decision was to get rid of forever and ever and ever the dash between VH and 1. And for years afterwards, in all these affiliate feeds and in the New York Times television listing, they kept listing it with a dash. So I feel like we had a full-time PR person calling, you know, to be the anti-dash watcher.
What was wrong with the dash to you?
It was not part of our brand. There was no dash. It was like, it was really, when you think of Video Hits 1, was why it became VH1. No one in a million years, person on the street interview, would know that. And for whatever reason, it just struck this arbitrary and overblown chord that we got rid of the dash and, you know, should never be seen again. It represented old regime, old era.
Were they just sort of coming to you as like a just throw everything at the wall, come up with something, or did they give you any kind of creative vision of what they saw the new rebranding being, or did that just?
Well, I feel like I feel like it really was a team of John and his direct reports who wanted to elevate music, decrease what had been a crutch, which is this hours and hours, 8-10 hours a day during the day of comedy, stand-up, brick wall, old-fashioned comedy, and that it needed to be very modern. It was all about music. It was about radio formats then and the rise of a thing called adult contemporary. And so essentially VH1 was reverse engineered to not be MTV. And all of that ethos from the brand itself, the color palette, and ultimately what really transformed first in programming was the music video playlist. There were no shows other than the acquired comedy. So I feel like it was a team effort, but the aesthetics of it, the holder of the brand, the development of the do's and don'ts, the who we are, the voice, really came from the promotions department. And we struggled, you know, pretty mightily, you know, to balance comedy versus elegance versus music, you know, all of those things. But we sure got there.
Yeah, it seems like it worked.
Yeah.
Now, also during the mid-90s, you were executive producer on a lot of the shows, the original shows that VH1 was producing.
Yeah.
So can you talk a bit about the Fashion Awards and how you also revamped that?
Yes. So what really happened was that wasn't like an also. That was a new job at VH1. So what happened was I took the job in the fall of '94. I signed I guess I signed a 2-year deal, but like I never had a job before. I didn't understand like what was happening. I'm like, this is a freelance gig. I need to redesign this network. I have to deliver this brand Bible, this new logo, this packaging. Great. Started that, had a kid, came back, delivered it. And about a year later, a year and a half later, I was like, hey, I'm done. Look, I actually delivered your full channel redesign. We won BDAs. We're really proud. This is great. And I don't think I'm your person to be like, hey, watch this video block on Tuesdays at this time. Like, I don't think I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't even understand what the nature of television promotion really meant as a job forever. And John was like, oh, I get it, but here's the thing, like, you signed this piece of paper that's your contract. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, you know, that's the kind of thing where, like, when you go on vacation and you still get paid, that's how you know you have a job, you're not a freelancer. Like, right, okay, so I got like 6 more months, I got it, I want to do a great job. So very shortly after this conversation, John called me in, and it was a dark day. And in rapid sequence, what happened was that incredible person, Linda Corradina, was leaving the network as the head of programming. And John said to me, like, hey, I'm going to get like a new head of programming. That's going to happen. But in the meantime, like, here's what. You want to do something new. And in my head, I've synthesized this, and it may not actually have happened this way, but I feel like it might have. John said, you know, you're really, really good at these 30-second things, promos. Terrific, like really good. You used to be like very, very good at like 2 hours things, like movies. If you kind of put them all together, maybe you'd be really good at like half-hour or hour like TV shows. It's like a combination. And I was dumber than a post and like, yes, that makes a ton of sense. And I gave up my VP of on-air promotion, and I became the, I think, SVP of original programming and development.
Yeah, and I had that way later. I had that not until '99. So that was actually
I
like
was
a year or
like
two
96.
after. Okay, so now that makes sense. So
That
you
was
weren't
like
an also,
96.
you were producing.
Maybe 97. So I had a new job and a new job, but no boss, which was also weird. And I didn't think twice about it. You know, all the Kremlinology of today, like who are you going to work for? What's it going to? It was like no big deal.
Did you report to someone?
No, I reported to John still for the interim, but it was clear that I would have reported to Linda, but a new head of programming was going to come in. So in the meantime, I know it was 96, and I'll tell you why in a second. In the middle of like, okay, sure, I'll make TV shows with no boss. Okay. We had almost no original TV shows on VH1. It was still music video blocks. And this series of day parts, as we called them, with VJs. So our VJs were, you know, similar to MTV's. Ours were a little older, you know, whatever. And so the first mandate was to make a TV show, but stay true to the mission of VH1, which was as a music network. And so I got to original programming, and an incredible head of development named Jane Lipsitz said, you know, we have one idea we think is really, really good. And it's this thing, it's going to be a half-hour long. We're going to take 5 music videos, and we're going to do like this really funny, witty, amazing behind-the-scenes information about it. And so it turns out that the first show under my, era that we greenlit was Pop-Up Video, Tadlow and Woody Thompson's creation. And so that was the first show we greenlighted. It took a while for like this new head of programming to come, and all we knew was like this guy from NBC was coming. And the reason I know the date is that this guy from NBC, Jeff Gaspin, came to VH1, and for the second time, I turned to this about-to-be new boss and said, I really am excited to work for you. I greenlighted all this bunch of shows, but here's the thing. I'm about to go out on maternity leave. So I'm going to tell you where I'm at, and then I'm going to have to go like sometime in March, but I'll be back. And so that's how I know that this all happened in '96, and that was the beginning of '97.
Right, and that started a decades-long relationship with Jane Lipsitz. And
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And her partner, Dan Cutforth, who produced, Jane was on the inside, Dan was on the outside as a producer, and they produced VH1's first Emmy-nominated series, Bands on the Run, which was an incredible series.
What makes a good producing team?
I would say it's as mercurial as any other relationship. It can be 2 similar people who just really have a mind meld and see the same vision in the same way, or it can be, a complementary pair who do different things that kind of make that 360-degree orb. I'm always fascinated by co-directors of anything, let alone co-producers. So, yeah, Jane and Dan just had this magical, and their company name is Magical Elves, and they are elfin in their delight and sparkle, and they're weaving gold out of all sorts of materials. And that's how I got to know them, and that's really how VH1 development took off. We moved Jane out to the West Coast to open this West Coast development department to really transform into a TV network, not a music video network.
Now, I mean, Pop-Up Video was such a great success for them, but a lot of the artists that were profiled had issues. I think like Billy Joel, and there were some others that didn't take too kindly to these,
probably
words.
Every artist, not just some. Well, at that time, I just spoke to a reporter for HuffPo who did an incredible piece just published about Divas Live.
I just saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's the anniversary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. 98. And in thinking about that and then reading the piece, the head of music and talent, another incredibly odd thing about the MTV networks is that usually there's a talent relations department, at a network that's very talent heavy, either through casting or through PR, talent relations. At MTV Networks, there was a music talent relations department for exclusively the relationships with labels, artists, and their managers.
That makes sense.
Of course it does. And so the trickiest thing about Pop-Up Video was we knew in development, part of why it is the show that it is that in development we realized that calling up the artists was not going to yield anything interesting whatsoever. That the beauty of the show is that the grist for the mill that we gained was from, the wardrobe supervisor, the craft service PA, it really actually predated sort of the what the internet does for you, is give you, you know, knowledge that you can't get from mainstream publications.
Oh, that's where all the factoids came from.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
They came from cast, and a cast meaning like 90th dancer in the Janet Jackson video, not Janet Jackson cast, or crew, you know, usually not even the director, because the director needed to work again, whereas the source of craft service PA, you know, it was a different level of stakes. So the point being that we really knew what we were inventing. It was also, you know, right up my alley, visually compelling, super clean, a little bit funny, very tight brand. And I learned a ton on that show. We absolutely rewrote the rules about you know, how to engage with artists and management, and like deliver priceless information, and also go against the convention that people don't want to read on TV. Like, there was every reason in the world not to do that show. You had to read, it was graphic intensive, it took away from the original art, the bloop sound was annoying. We had, you know, 8 months of, you know, debate over the bloop sound. Should we have it? Too annoying. The size of the letters, the size of the bubbles, when to cover it, the icons, everything, who owned what in what, you know, graphic form. But it was like the development on any other show, a lot more difficult and complex than you'd think, and also than it probably should have been.
Mm-hmm. Was there any legal pushback from
Tons. On every single script in every single episode. Hundreds and thousands of factoids.
But more from standards and practices, or from outside complaints?
Mostly standards and practices, and our own legal team who vetted every pop.
Were you surprised at anything that did get through?
Probably, but I can't remember now.
Anything that they just said, no way, that you thought was ridiculous?
You know, the things that were blocked were things that were alleged. And we never in pop-up went for a pop that said, you know, something nefarious or spurious. We did, kind of with a wink, use the word allegedly as like a punctuation mark to something widely known, you know, the benign form of widely known but never written down is like, you know, something in a rider, in a dressing room rider, the green M&Ms, you know, whatever the famous story would be. And the slightly nefarious would be around drug use or, you know, showing up drunk. Like, we would never go that far if unsubstantiated.
Right.
Right.
Now, there's a ton, I mean, I don't know with your maternity leave, but I know that you were involved with fashion, VH1 Fashion Awards.
Well, we did the first VH1 Fashion Awards.
Yeah.
We did the first VH1 Fashion Awards in 95.
Mm-hmm. And then 96 was totally different. Can you talk about what you changed?
What happened was we produced the 95 Fashion Awards extremely safely. It was like a precious, you know, the wrong intersection, I think, of music and fashion. And we didn't have the permission, we didn't have the fashion cred, which we should have earned better, but we didn't have it. And I was more on the promo side at that time. And then it was a big success in a way, but we just picked like TV and music folks. We didn't quite get the fashion element right. So the second year, I'm pretty sure, was the year that we partnered with Vogue. and it became officially the VH1 Vogue Fashion Awards. And that, of course, with Anna Wintour and at the time the publisher, gave us the permission to just think bigger, think more fashion cred, and book the most important people at the most important time in real relationship between fashion and music. And it also, which doesn't necessarily speak to fashion, but does speak to how you make a franchise and how you make a TV show. And another thing it gave birth to, at some point along the way, we hired the producer Joel Gallen. And Joel, to us, was a big MTV Networks name. And he knew music talent and could handle it, could handle the ego and importance of the fashion talent, but also had this window into comedic talent. And what we were trying to balance was going too surfacey and commercial the first year with too high and inside fashion. There's a reason why, even to this day, most fashion shows are not put on TV. It's just not as compelling television as you'd think. And so Joel brought in his sort of close-knit circle of comedic writers and performers, and chief among them, David Cross, who did this incredible short called The Nose, and he was a perfumer's nose. Andy Dick, who was still dealing with his issues at the time, but a genius, funny comedian in these sketches. Kathy Griffin, who I met at that time, and I think whose first sketch was this school for ugly models, where she stood in the middle and was like the den mother to these ugly models, and I don't know why it was funny, but it really, really was. And most well-known, Ben Stiller. And the first couple of years, I believe what Ben did were these commercial parodies. At the time, these white psych Gap ads were all the rage. And we somehow, hit on commercial parodies, not a new invention, but it was our invention. And they were rip-roaringly funny. Did them for a couple of years. The third year, I think, maybe, I think this was the year with Kathy, David, Ben. He invented a character, a male model, and it was a short, a runner in our VH1 Vogue Fashion Awards called Derek Zoolander. And that gave birth to Zoolander, the character, and years later, Zoolander, the movie.
Which I
executive produced as the VH1 producer who put it together between VH1, Ben, Joel Gallen, and the Paramount Studio, again, which was part of Viacom at the time, still is. And we didn't have a film shingle the way Nickelodeon did, so we had to bring it to Paramount to get it done, and that was my job.
What was your role in the RuPaul show, the first RuPaul show?
My role in the first RuPaul show was to be its champion, its developer, and to not even think twice, really, as to why it belonged on VH1. It also began my, long-term, incredibly close association with Randy Barbado and Fenton Bailey at World of Wonder. And of course, they still produce RuPaul's Drag Race. The RuPaul show came about because it was a great pitch, and Fenton and Randy pitched it as like, the Dinah Shore show meets if Diana Ross had had a show that would just be a real pop culture talk show with elements of performance, monologue, and incredible guests.
What made him a good host?
Well, Rue is an eternally curious person. So he was deeply interested in the culture, deeply interested in putting himself forward. It was, at that moment where he was coming off the runway himself and had his big music video hit and wanted to be, a real part of pop culture and could inform through a deep appreciation of other people's art. So what made him a great host is what makes him a great host in a different way. He can talk to anyone. He can get incredible moments out of anyone. And it's always sort of a performance. He was never out of drag in the show. It was a bear to produce. It was a bear to book, for sure. But we loved it, and we knew it was important programming for the network to have this daily talk show. Yeah, and it did really well. It really did.
I mean, you said you were the champion. Were there forces that were fighting against it or didn't see the fit at VH1 for a show like that?
When I think back on it, I don't remember, I had to get my green light, done. I don't remember anyone saying like, no, there's no way we're going to do it. This is not us. I more remember like, how do we make this our show? What makes it a VH1 show? We were still in this music first mandate, and we had performance in every single opening. We tried to make it as topical as we could, although we couldn't afford to not gang shoot it, to shoot it every single day with a guest every single day. We shot in these 3-week blocks and shot our season in those 3 weeks. We definitely had pushback from music talent who just did not want to appear on, at the time, Rue was called a drag queen, did not want to appear with a drag queen, did not feel it was legitimate. And it was really the courting of the biggest stars who understood the power of the female audience and the male gay audience, like Cher.
I was just thinking the Cher episode, yeah.
Diana Ross, like those were landmark shows that we worked forever to book. And, it was a great time.
We're going to take a quick break.
Great.